So my priorities are going to be to cut the things that we cannot afford right now, that are cuts that make sense while protecting the most vulnerable. When it comes to Medicare and Social Security, the voters in the district tell me, and in the polls that I've looked at the national level, time and again, is preserve the guarantee. There are places in government that we can cut, and we're going to have to make some tough cuts. I think that we look at, some of the things we've already talked about, Medicare being able to negotiate for lower drug prices. We need to close the subsidies for oil and gas industries. But then we also need to look at some of the tough things like defense spending. I'm someone that's going to be a strong voice for defense, but there are many programs in the Department of Defense that need to be cut. And then we have to be honest and realistic about the waste and fraud that exists in government. I think I saw a figure recently that Medicare loses about $1 billion a week in, I think it was 2010 numbers, in fraudulent payouts alone. Imagine, where we would be if we could actually go after that. If we just went to the Justice Department and say, here, this is what you guys are supposed to be in charge of, cut down on that $1 billion a week, we would be far better off. So, go after the cuts that we need to, that we can afford, be creative, and also be willing to admit that there are problems within the system, within government itself, that we have to fix. My advice to both sides would be, number one, the strike is a bad thing for kids, and that we're here shows that there's a failure on both sides, and that you need to get back to the bargaining table, and that maybe they need to take a look at what the public schools and have done here in the suburbs. We've had some instances here where we've managed to avert strikes because the public sector unions and the administration, the school administration, have actually compromised with one another and come to the bargaining table with real honest discussions, and we're willing to work through it. It goes back to what I said about it's not a zero-sum game, and it's going to be messy. But in this case, I think, my friends on both sides of the Chicago Public Schools debate could learn a little something about the process that was sometimes painful that we went through out here in the suburbs. And that's how I would, approach all public sector unions and administration as well. I will be someone who calls for tolerance and for calm. I know we've got this whole fight going on right now between the Romney campaign and the Obama campaign and all this, and I'm pretty disappointed by it. Because I think, look, bottom line, America was attacked 2 nights ago. When you attack a United States embassy, when you attack a consulate, you're attacking America. And it was a time for us to pull together. And people are going after Mitt Romney because his campaign put out that statement. But people are sort of not noticing that the Obama campaign responded. It was not a time for campaigns to be putting out any statements. It was a time for us to take a deep breath and have clear heads and figure out what we were going to do as a nation. It was a time for us to come together. I know what happens when there's a firefight. And when there's a firefight, you don't just start blasting away. You figure out with a clear head what your action is. And it was not a time for either side to be putting out comments. And that's, if they ask me, that's what I'm going to say. It's like, look, America was attacked. I'm talking, when I go on Saturday, most of the people there will be Americans, and they will have the same concerns. But, what I'll tell them is I will always be a voice for calming things down, figuring it out, and understanding that as their member of Congress, I understand the responsibility that comes with the office that I will hold. And the things that I say as a public official carry weight. And the things that the president say carries weight. The things that Mitt Romney says, someone who wants to become commander-in-chief, carries weight. And you have to be aware of that before you start issuing statements, because real people get hurt, whether it's just in the district or, at our embassies overseas. My perspective is that, number one, we have to figure out what happened. The embassy in Libya was hit with an RPG. Most people don't bring an RPG to a protest. So there's something going on there. My perspective is that these nations are fledgling new democracies that are still working through the messiness of what it means to have freedom of speech. And they're working through, the governments are working through trying to figure out, have control within their own borders. Just as much as there were protesters who went after and killed our Americans in Libya. The next day, I saw a lot of photos of Libyans with signs that said, we're so sorry, this is not the bulk of the Libyan people. I saw those signs as well. So just as we don't want folks in these countries to judge us based on the actions of one independent film, we should not judge the entire nation based on the actions of the people who stormed the embassy until we know more. We have to cut the saber rattling. We have to keep a clear head, and we need to proceed with caution, but with the leadership that we hold. And we are a leader of the free world, and we have to maintain that. But we can't be trivial, and we cannot be flippant in our responses when these things happen around the world. You know, I will tell you that in my gut, and I want us to go after whoever it is that killed our ambassador and our embassy personnel in Libya. I am all for going after those people. But we cannot attack the entire country of Libya and condemn an entire nation of people because of the actions of what may have been al-Qaeda extremists. We can't let the extremists be the ones who run the political discourse, the internet. We cannot let the extremists be the people who dictate our foreign policy.